Hello, this is Inside the Press Box with Sunil Sunder Raj for the Everyday Fan Sports. I'm happy to be speaking with head coach Danny Rocco of the University of Delaware Blue Hens football team. Coach Rocco, thank you so much again for taking some time out to speak with me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. It's good to be on. Thank you.
Hey, yeah, Coach Rocco said the team is off to a 2-0 start. Said this weekend, said playing at Rutgers. I said you're in your fifth season there as the head coach. Can you just talk about the start, of the season here?
Yeah, well, the most unique thing for us this year is, we played a spring season. So, the FCS had their spring season. We couldn't play in the fall because of COVID. So we had a really successful spring season. We won our conference championship, the Colonial Athletic Association, the CAA, which is a great league. And we went into the playoffs and we had a really good run into the playoffs, into the postseason. So It was a fast turnaround here, coming back into summer camp and then starting our season up at University of Maine 2 weeks ago. And then most recently last weekend at home against St. Francis, and now heading up to play a Big Ten school at Rutgers. So things are happening really fast, just because of that quick turnaround and the spring season. But our guys are excited and certainly recognize the challenge, but really appreciate the opportunity this week to play up at Rutgers.
Yeah. Can you just talk about this year's roster? It said experienced group, Coach Rocco. Just looking at that, you returned, 4 All-Americans. Said here, running back Dejon Lee. Said the Colonial Athletic Association Player of the Year, and also Walter Payton Award finalist. Tackle David Kroll, safety Kendrick Whitehead. Linebacker Johnny Buchanan, but said so far, in the first 2 games, your quarterback Nola Henderson, wide receiver Thyrick Pitts, and we talked about Gene Coleman, and then on the defensive side, said Andrew Pulowski and Colby Reeder. If you could just talk about those guys and just what you've seen out of this year's team so far, Coach Rocco.
Well, I think the unique thing again was because of the NCAA allowing for what they call the super senior. Everybody came back, and I think that's a real statement about our program. We had 50-year seniors that came back for 6 years, and that's not really all that common. Guys quite often look to transfer or get in the transfer market. So we have a veteran team coming back. We have a team that has, a good level of talent at every position. You mentioned some of the accolades we've had. Offensively, David Kroll, our left tackle, was, an All-American candidate. Dejon Lee, our starting running back, is also a player that has those kinds of accolades. And then Nolan Henderson, our quarterback, and then Thyrick Pitts and Gene Coleman are our receivers. Gene Coleman's a Bergen Catholic guy, and he's off to a great start this year. And then defensively, kind of the same thing. We've got Kendrick Whitehead at safety, was a all-conference, all-American candidate, and Colby Reeder at linebackers, another really, really good player. Johnny Buchanan. Johnny's another guy from a Jersey guy from Brick Township, I believe. So we got a nice team. We got a good, solid team. We have a team that has, one of 9 of our last 10 games, and just kind of stepping up into that Big Ten world, and playing against a team like Rutgers will be, like I said, a very exciting challenge and a great opportunity for our program.
Yeah, definitely. Said you were selected, I think, 5th, said in the American Football Coaches Association, the football championship subdivision poll, the preseason poll. Can you talk about, just going back to the spring football season 2021, just a tremendous run there, Coach Rocco, in the playoffs. I think you guys hosted, I think, your first playoff game. I think it was in 10 or 11 years. I mean, you defeated Sacred Heart University in 1910, and then it said the win over Jacksonville State University. Just when, what comes to your mind? Just, it said, during that stretch, in the playoffs, Coach Rocco.
Well, one of our goals every year is, to compete for the conference championship and then to win in the postseason. And We got in the playoffs in 2018 and we lost in the first round down at James Madison. James Madison had a great season, a great team. But, getting in isn't really what we want to do. We want to get in and win. I think when you get in the playoffs and you win a game or two, anything can happen. It's like a new season, So this year we were able to kind of do both. We won the CAA championship and we got into the postseason, and then we won our first two games and kind of got us to the national semifinals. And, the game down at Jacksonville State was probably a signature win for us. They have a really good program, and a lot of talent. And we got off to a great start. We played our best half of football down there. And then here just recently, as you saw last weekend, Jacksonville State, found a way to upset Florida State, So there's so many things in motion at one time when you talk about preparing your team for the next week's game. And I've always believed that every game is a standalone game. You can't really look at last week's scores and you can't compare scores. And, we certainly are going to have to play our best game. I think that's the one thing that's definitive. Sometimes on your schedule, a good team may be able to not play its best game and still find a way to win. Well, that's not the case in a situation like this for us. We're going to have to play our best football game to give us a shot late in the game to be relevant and have a chance to find a way to win.
I know your main focus again is on Rutgers this Saturday, Coach Rocco. I just wanted to ask you, once you get into conference play here, I wanted to ask you, versus Albany, October 2nd, followed by at Rhode Island, at Stony Brook. And then you have three, consecutive home games versus James Madison, versus Dixie State, versus William Mary, at Richmond, and then you finish up with Villanova. Just looking at the schedule, what comes to your mind just looking at it, Coach Rocco?
Well, I had been telling our players for quite some time that I really like this schedule, and it's really exciting because, we opened with a conference game on the road, and that's a big deal, and we found a way to win that. That's a big. The last game of the year is kind of our rivalry game against Villanova, and that's home this year. So our season is sandwiched between two conference games, and that's not always the case. Quite often you start the season out of conference, so we had to play well early to get a conference win on the road. We're certainly going to have to play well late to beat a really good Villanova team at home in a conference game. And then in the middle, we have the rest of our conference, which is a really tough conference. But we have a team out of the NEC conference in St. Francis. We had them last week. We have a team out of the Western Athletic Conference, Dixie State, that no one in this part of the country knows anything about. And then we have a Big Ten opponent this weekend up at Rutgers. So it's a really exciting schedule. I do like the idea that we have some home games stacked up on the back end. I think that's why winning that opener at Maine in conference is such a big win, because getting road victories in conference play is always a challenge. To get one right up front, knowing that our back-ended schedule was really pretty home friendly as we get deeper into the CAA season.
Yeah. I'm just wanted to ask you, Coach Rocco, from the first season, you took over until now, just to see the progression of this program and see where, it is going. I mean, to greater heights here. Can you just talk about from that first season, what, you learned, and just as far as, coming in, taking over the program and, again, to see, again, all the achievements, set over these past 5 years. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I think the thing for me was that I had familiarity with the school and the area. I was the head coach at the University of Richmond, which was in the CAA before I came to Delaware. So Delaware was a school that I was seeing on film every week. We played them twice during my timeline at Richmond. And I had a familiarity, with the university and the campus and the recruiting area, and for me, I've always felt my dad was a high school coach in Pennsylvania for 20 some years. We moved all over the state. And then my dad finished his career at Penn State. He was on Joe Paterno's staff for 18 years, and mom and dad are still retired, living in State College, Pennsylvania. As a matter of fact, I think my dad and Coach Yano know each other well because Greg was there when my dad was there as an administrator. But what I would say is that, being able to recruit, the 95 corridor, Delaware, Jersey, Eastern PA, Central PA, Maryland, DC. This is kind of what I would recognize as my sweet spot, in terms of, growing up in this part of the country and having connections and familiarity. And in a lot of ways, that's what Coach Shiano's doing at Rutgers. He's kind of, coming home again, so to speak. And he has a great understanding of the state, the high school association. A lot of his coaches are connected to the state of New Jersey. They're connected to him, so there's some excitement and some enthusiasm about, kind of being back in what I would recognize as, my neck of the woods. And I've really enjoyed that. And I think this has really helped our roster develop here over the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, that was going to be one of my questions, Coach Rocco, was about the recruiting, but you answered that very well. I have to ask you about your coaching staff, Coach Rocco. Jared Ambrose, your offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach, Manny Rojas, your defensive coordinator. If you want to start with them, just how they've their contributions, said to the football program, helping you as well.
Yeah, I'll start with Manny. Manny was a captain for me when I was the head coach at Liberty University in 2006. So my first season as a head coach, Manny was a senior on that football team, leader, captain, and Manny immediately, got into coaching and, got into our program, and he started in the weight room, and then he worked as a GA and kind of just worked his way up the ladder. So since then, Manny's been with me every year except for 1 year. So that's through 06 all the way to this season. And Manny left for 1 year. He went to Lafayette to be the defensive coordinator. Then after 1 year, my position as DC opened up, and I brought Coach Rojas back. And Manny does a great job, has a lot of energy, a lot of enthusiasm, has a really good wealth of knowledge. And we're a little bit unique with what we do defensively. And Manny takes a lot of pride in that and being able to be a little bit different and maybe unconventional. And then with Jared Ambrose, Jared's brother, Rob, is the head coach at Towson. And Towson is in the CAA. We're in the same league. So when I was at Richmond as the head coach and we played against Towson, I always liked what they did on offense. And Rob's brother, Jared, was his offensive coordinator. So there was a period of time that I was really kind of tracking Towson's offense, kind of tracking Jared Ambrose, and I came here to Delaware. And, after a couple years here, again, spoke to Rob Ambrose, the head coach there at Towson, and kind of asked him, what his thoughts would be. And I think that they kind of felt like, in a perfect world, it'd probably be good for Jared and his brother to kind of, split and go separate ways and create different kinds of opportunities for Jared. So Jared's come in here and done a really good job. And I'm really excited about both Coach Ambrose and Coach Rojas.
That's great. I don't know if you said, I know that you have, is it a large, coaching staff here? Is it Coach Rocco? I don't know if you want to, talk about them as well. It said there's Brian Stunspring, your offensive line coach, Levern Bellin, defensive line, Bill Poland, tight ends, also recruiting coordinator, Dave Legg, outside linebackers and coach special teams, Alex Wood, wide receivers coach, Holman Copeland, corners. If you want to just talk about them, I can go on here. So if you want to just talk about the rest of the staff.
I would just say this about the rest of our staff right now. We're probably as aligned and as in sync as we've ever been here. So that's one of the more challenging things when you take over a new job. And very seldom can you bring your entire staff, so you're always having to piecemeal a few things and trying to find the right mix and match. And so with all of these guys now, as I head into my 5th year, some of these guys have been with me for over a decade. I mentioned Manny Rojas, Lee Vern Beelan, Bill Poland. Bill Poland and Lee Vern were with us at Virginia and at Richmond. Lee Vern Beelan was with me at Liberty, Richmond, and now here. Dave Legg was with us the entire time that we were at Richmond. But then the guys that kind of have come in anew, Alex Wood's got a phenomenal resume and career, but Alex has been with me now 5 years, so you're kind of way beyond that idea of trying to get to know who we are, and so I really think that Jared has done a good job coming in here and, first trying to get in alignment with me, and then taking that alignment to the offensive staff room. And then Coach Rojas, who's been with me the longest, kind of had already been through that exercise, so I feel real good about the alignment of our staff, and I feel really good about the role that everybody has both on the field and off the field with the relationships with our student athletes.
Terrific. I think an important component, Coach Rocco, is strength and conditioning. Can you talk about Chris Stewart? That's, as you prepare for a season, that's, to be in the weight room and, said even with the drills on the field. Can you just talk about that as well?
Well, I would say this, that the strength coach, oddly enough, is the only coach that ever really would oversee the whole team when the head coach isn't there. So your offensive and defensive coordinators really never find themselves in front of the whole team. The strength coach does, and he does quite often. And we just completed a brand new facility here, the Whitney Athletic Center, and it is extraordinarily impressive. And it's impressive in every nook and cranny of the building. And it's a facility that is really suited for the holistic student athlete experience. And, from the training room to the training table, to the weight room, to the nutrition area, we've got to the academic studies and study hall. And it's a phenomenal facility. Our weight room is really impressive. And Chris Stewart and Big Tom Evans are for his first assistant, who was an offensive lineman for us when we were at Richmond, played for the Green Bay Packers for a little bit. They've got an extraordinary setup in the weight room. We've got a lot of technology, a lot of space, a lot of equipment, and they're doing an extraordinary job with our student athletes. And it has become, as you know, a year-round endeavor. It's you don't lift weights a couple months out of the year. It's a year-round proposition, and Coach Stewart does a great job leading us in that area.
That's great. Just have a couple more. I can't thank you for the time, Coach Rocco. You talked about facilities. Said there's Delaware Stadium that seats almost 19,000, and then as well, I wanted to ask you about the support from the administration and athletic department, director of athletics, Chrissy Raywalk. If I'm getting your name wrong, I apologize. And President Dennis Asanis, if that's incorrect. But I just wanted to ask you just about that as well.
Well, it's funny you ask that question, because I used the word a few minutes ago, alignment, and I think that defines kind of our vision here at Delaware. There's a really, really strong alignment between the people and between the values and the vision. And it really does start with Dennis Asanis, our school president. And he understands that, your athletics programs, your football stadium in particular, it's the front porch of the university. We had a great atmosphere out here last Saturday night. Our student body was extraordinary. And, when you're in a college environment, you'd like to think that game day football is part of that environment, and that's the way they believe here it should be. And then Chrissy Raywalk has done a great job in a lot of areas, but, raising money, fundraising, allocating funds, and then our resources and our facility enhancement, which kind of was stagnant here for maybe decades. It kind of, we kind of had that old concrete big stadium, but it was kind of what it was for 20 or 30 years, other than a coat of paint, that never really did anything to it. We had the little kind of crappy looking press box that you kind of see at some, small high schools up there heading up 95, and that's what we had, and but here in the last 18 months, it's been not just a facelift, it's been a categorically different impression of who we are. Mm-hmm. And, at the end of the day, how does that matter? Well, it matters in a lot of areas, but it matters in recruiting. And, just trust me as I talk to, I'll mention the New Jersey student athletes we get coming down here, down 95. I mean, it's a short drive and they're rolling into this place like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is Delaware. And you're like, yeah, well, this is who we are right now, So I think that alignment between the administration, the athletic department, the coaches is paramount.
Can you talk about the support as well from alumni and then even the community of Newark, Delaware there, Coach Rocco?
Yeah, well, our alumni are very proud, and when you look at our history, we've had an extraordinary history in past in football. Tubby Raymond, and just the championships and the accomplishments that he has had over the years. And it's kind of like I said, it just kind of went into hibernation. It's kind of like, no one's fault, like no one really deserves any blame. It just kind of went into hibernation a little bit, and maybe things were taken for granted a little bit, in terms of the challenges were out there. And as well as me is that when your competitors are raising the ante, you got to step into the game or else you're going to fall behind. And I think they failed to realize that for a period of time, whether it was a decade or whatever it might have been. And the next thing you knew, they woke up one morning and they were like behind. They were literally behind. They had 2 seasons here back to back, 2-6 in the conference, and again, that can happen to anybody at any time, but it's hard to say that you're a 2-6 program in your conference, but you're a champion or a perennial champion, So I think when they got a dose of that reality, going to make them take a giant step back and say, okay, what do we have to do? And I don't think they really had asked that question for a while, or at least they didn't honestly try to address that question. But they have with Dennis Asanis and they have with Chrissy Raywalk, and things are starting to really churn here in a positive direction.
That's great. A question just popped up into my head. What you want, I ask coaches this, especially, what do you want that Blue Hens, jersey, that helmet, to represent, said, for a player that puts that on? I just was wondering about that, Coach Rocco.
Well, I think there's got to be an appreciation for the privilege that you have to wear it. And I'll stand in front of the team at the beginning of every season as I sit in the auditorium in the team room and say, you guys don't have the right to be seated there. So it's a privilege to be seated there. And there have been student athletes seated in those chairs for decades and decades before you arrived. And after you leave, there's going to be student athletes seated in those chairs for decades after you depart. So while you're here, recognize the privilege that you have to wear that helmet, to wear that jersey, wear it with pride. And then I'll say, it's no different for me. I said, I don't have the right to be your head coach. I mean, the day that I forget that it's a privilege to be the head coach here will be my last day here. because there's been great coaches before and there'll be great coaches after. But in this moment, we kind of share this experience together. And I think our ability to have pride in that and be very respectful of that, what it means to represent the tradition, the history, I think that really does speak loudly to the message I want our student athletes to be able to carry with them.
Great. I was wondering for you, Coach Rocco, what makes the game of football so special? To coach it, said I just had to ask you that.
Well, I think that there's a lot of things, but when you talk about making it unique or special, I do think you have to mention that the physical element of the game. It is a physical game, okay? And I think all of your team sports have strategies, right? And analytics. And, so for me to sit there and say that the strategy in football is so much grander than that in basketball or baseball, that would be maybe self-serving, But I think the physicality of the game, okay, makes it different. Okay, you really do have to endure. And then the second thing that I think is probably most prominent is just there isn't another sport where at the end of the day you played 65 or 70 guys in the game. And, on any given day, any one of those 65 or 70 guys can either make a play to help you win or do something to make it more difficult or challenging to win. In a basketball game on a normal day, they're going to roll 8 or 9 guys out on the court. Soccer's not going to be more than 14 or 15 guys are going to get to play in a given day. You know what I mean? So like baseball, how many guys are going to play in a baseball game? You're talking every single time you take the field, you're playing a physical game, a competitive game where you're going to get 65 or more guys on the field, giving them an opportunity to contribute, and I really think that that's why, to me, it's the greatest team game. Everything really does have to work in sync and in unison. And the one guy that might win the game for you is the guy that's on your punt block unit that goes out there 4 or 5 times in a game. And one of those plays, he blocks a punt. And you won the game because of his effort and those 4 plays that he played. And that's uncommon. And I really, really enjoy that team element of football and have an appreciation for how everything works together.
Wonderful. And final 2 questions, Coach Rocco. You talked about your family, your mom and dad. I want to ask you, your wife, Julie, your daughter, Amy, and son, David. Your son, David, is the offensive coordinator, I believe, at Western Illinois University. So if you can just talk about the support, you received from them, during, said your football, during your coaching journey here.
Well, I think, thank you for asking. I think that there was a moment in time when Julie and I were married for 12 years and we lived in 8 different states.
Wow.
Okay, so during that timeline, David was born in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I was coaching at the University of Tulsa, and then Amy was born up at Boston College. I was working for Tom Coughlin at Boston College. And my whole family's coaching. My brother Frank, my brother Dave, my son Dave. Dave's the offensive coordinator out there at Western Illinois. Dave was with me for a couple years as an understudy, as a GA, and my daughter is in law school down at UNC Chapel Hill. So it's kind of, I grew up in a family where football was the number one topic of conversation. My dad was a high school coach. My dad was my high school coach. My dad was a teacher. My best friends played high school ball for my dad, so like for us to be at home around the dinner table or at Thanksgiving or over Christmas and us not talking about or watching football, what else was there to talk about? So we just got brought up in that culture, where it was just a big part of who we are. You talk about family, faith, and football. I mean, that's kind of the beginning and end all.
Yeah. Final question, Coach Rocco. What is your message? I think for younger players out there, as well as people who want to break into the coaching ranks as well.
Well, for younger coaches, trying to break in, I think you've got to really be persistent, and there's a lot of different ways to crack into the profession. And I think that would be my words of wisdom. And I think that we get so pigeonholed into like what we think we want to do that we fail to find other options or other paths that might get you there. I'll give you a couple good examples. Like in the last 5 or 6 years, it's becoming more and more common matter of fact, I think Coach Shiano has one up at Rutgers, but a guy that was at a Division II school that ended up, becoming a coordinator in the Big Ten. I know that there's Mike Gundy at Oklahoma State has kind of hired guys off of smaller colleges to come work at Oklahoma State. And it's kind of like, find a place where you can do what you want to do and you can show what you're capable of doing. And it doesn't have to be, at that highest level. It doesn't have to be in the biggest venue. Find a place where you can show what you're capable of doing and have that body of work. Like I mentioned with my dad was a high school coach for 20 years, and then he coached at Penn State for 18. So he paid his dues doing what he does in that high school environment. He developed a reputation. People respected who he was. They respected how he worked with his players. They respected his teams. Okay, matter of fact, and that gives a long time ago, but in the same year, he had an option of going to Penn State to work or to Pitt to work as an assistant coach, so it's just kind of being able to be a little more open-minded as to how you want to move forward with your career. Be more open to different kinds of opportunities in coaching just to get your feet on the ground. And then you can start showing people what you're capable of doing.
Sounds good. Hey, Coach Rocco, the floor is yours. If I've left anything out, you're more than welcome to add at this point.
No, thank you very much. I think I said it earlier, just in terms of, we are a regional school. I am recruiting high school student athletes, and I have not been on an airplane to recruit a student athlete since I've been to the University of Delaware. And I've never been able to say that. Like, I've never been at a school. When I was at Richmond, and we were flying all over the country to find guys, the right profile guy, in this location, okay, we draw a radius, call it whatever you want to call it, but 300 miles, 350 miles, 400 miles, whatever it is. And we're working in that radius. And there are a lot of great programs and talented players and kids that really want both an education and a football experience. And I think we're offering that at a really high level. And I think as people continue to come down and take a look, that word's kind of out on the street.
Sounds good. Hey, Coach Rocco, thank you again for, the opportunity to interview you and, talk about, the University of Delaware, Blue Hens football program. And again, wishing you, the rest of the coaching staff and the players, continued success this season.
I appreciate that. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you.